Okay, so welcome again to this webinar where we'll be looking at standards 5 through 8. I'm Sue Shermer with Heartland Area Education Agency, where I support the work of school counseling.
And I'm Meredith Doman with Des Moines Public Schools. I'm the Student Supports Coordinator and help support the work of counselors in the district there.
And as we stated earlier, there are two webinars that really come before this. The first one is kind of an overview of the evaluation supplement for school counselors. The second one is digging into standards 1 through 4, and then this one we will dig into standards 5 through 8.
And so in case you haven't viewed the other webinars, we just want to remind everyone that this is an evaluation supplement. It is designed to support the evaluation process in terms of being reflective opportunity for counselors to grow in their profession, and also as an educational tool for administrators doing that evaluation. So it is not something that anyone is required to do. It is a tool and a resource to help support the work of counselors across the state. And so now we'll pick up with digging into standards 5 through 8. And standard 5 then starts on page 14 of the supplement. Going ahead to look at assessment. This is the focus on data. While this says it uses a variety of methods to monitor student learning, for counselors this is not just about addressing how we use data and assess our delivery of curriculum lessons or other aspects of the program, but truly about how we use data to guide the entire decision-making for our comprehensive program, as that is the student learning that we need to monitor in our comprehensive program. So looking at the aligned counselor competencies, we're looking at the use of formal and informal methods of program evaluation. So again, not just of lesson evaluation or curriculum evaluation, but of the entire program. Using data to support that decision-making and making sure all aspects are effective. And then working with members of the counseling team and administration to identify those goals and how the program will be evaluated and how results will be shared. And again, understanding and using the data to establish those goals, and then how we analyze, interpret, and collect the relevant data. Now that includes the process, perception, and outcome data. So to review those, the process data is about what we're doing, who we're doing it with, the number of students, kind of the nuts and bolts. The perception data is how whatever was done impacted students' knowledge, attitude, or skills about that topic. And then the outcome data is connecting to those bigger picture results data pieces, specifically surrounding attendance, behavior, and achievement, but can also be about aligning with the core and whether or not those core standards were met through the delivery. Now, as we look at the rubric, this is where we're going to get into some nitty-gritty details and talking about the details of using data. Anecdotally, through conversations we have across the state, we need to recognize that we do a lot of really great work and we put a lot of assessment tools in along the way, and we are able to say what kids got out of things, of whether that was a small group or working with them one-on-one, and we know that the stories that we have from our kids are important, but we also know it's hard to paint a picture of the impact of a counseling program when all we have are those stories or those isolated incidents of measurement. So I'm going to start here with this by talking about the ineffective side. When we're understanding and using data, if we are not using data to advocate for students, and if we are not looking at or using our attendance, behavior, and achievement data to monitor and improve our student success, we are not fully implementing a comprehensive counseling program. And without that piece, it is ineffective. Also looking down in terms of the programs and interventions, if we do not use data to make those decisions, and then also looking at the larger program and taking the time to complete a program evaluation or using the program assessment that's in the Ask a National model. By not doing that, we're missing an opportunity to see how our full program fits and addresses overall student achievement, which is why our kids are in school on a day-to-day basis, is for their overall development and achievement. So, moving on to look at that, some of those developing stages is looking at the top here, knowing that data can be used, but maybe we're not sure of how to accomplish it. Or maybe we are looking at our building data in the areas of attendance, behavior, and achievement, but not quite acting on that. Also, when we have a basic understanding of how data can be used, but maybe we're not necessarily looking at that in terms of our programming and interventions to decide what are we going to focus on each year or during whatever time period we're looking at with that data. And then also going on here that maybe we are collecting some of that data, whether we're recording what we did and when we did it and who we did it with and the perception, and maybe we are even having that, but we don't really know how that connects to our program and we're not using it. We might be aware that there are some program evaluation tools, but we're doing that data collection maybe in isolation for, say, one small group or one closing the gap action plan or one curriculum unit. And we're not using it to guide our overall decision making about our program and making sure we have a fully implemented comprehensive program. Now, looking over to the effective side of that, as we look at that data, this is really about using the various forms, being a part of those building teams, looking at attendance, behavior, and achievement data, and then using it to identify any educational gaps to be addressed. There's the school data profile, which gives you a nice template for that with the Ask a National model to be able to do that and start to see if you have gaps. In some districts and buildings, this may be happening with leadership teams or other leaders. So again, how all these standards connect together is going in and looking at where those collaborations may exist. Then being able to analyze, synthesize, and disaggregate the data to look at student outcomes, identify and implement programs and interventions as needed. What is that data saying that my students need? And what am I going to go find to target those things? And then again, looking at the full program evaluation where I'm using data to demonstrate the value the school counseling program adds to student achievement. I need to be able to share what's going on there. And so this is being able to use it for my own use as a counselor to know what's there. To get highly effective, I start sharing that out with stakeholders to be able to fully articulate the comprehensive program. Using technology is incredibly helpful in being able to do this in terms of our surveying, in terms of recording, and how we keep track of all of this. And again, the annual review and assessment. So you start to see how all of these things are connected, that we're using data to drive the decisions that we're making on a daily basis, and then how all of those aspects of the program are connected and aligned with our goals. Now, I also want to point out that we know it can sometimes be difficult to find this data. So again, the importance of the collaboration with building teams, and also finding the resources available if this is a professional development need. We'll talk about professional development in a later standard.
Okay, so on to Standard 6. For a teacher, this refers to just classroom management. But for us as school counselors, we have two distinct areas. One is, yes, we do have to have those classroom management skills when we are delivering guidance lessons in the classroom. But also, unlike teachers, we have an entire program. If you look up here, our administrative rule says that the school counseling program means an articulated, sequential K-12 program that is comprehensive in scope, preventative in design, developmental in nature, driven by data, and integral to the school district's curricula and instructional program. So unlike a teacher, we are responsible for that entire program. And so in order to do this, if you look at the rubric, you'll see that whole program management idea. So how we are looking at those program assessments, use of time, are we using our time right? Are we working with other counselors or stakeholders to help create that full implemented school counseling program? Are we sitting down with a rationale and saying, you know what, this is why I am doing what I'm doing. This is based on data. And then, of course, over here in effective, spends at least 80% of our time either providing direct or indirect student services. For clarification on what is considered direct and indirect, refer to the Ask a National model because that explains it very carefully. Of course, also, what are appropriate and inappropriate school counseling duties? You know, there's something to be said for completing our fair share of those non-counseling duties, but at the same time, this is where having conversations with your administrator about, is this really the best use of my time? And how might we adjust my time so that I can spend more time in that whole program management area? Of course, in a highly effective school counseling program, You would have an advisory council for the comprehensive school counseling program. We understand that sometimes there are barriers in place for that, but there are also ways to get around that. Every district in the state of Iowa must have a school improvement advisory council. You could utilize that advisory council as your advisory council for the school counseling program as well. The whole idea is that they are focused specifically on the school counseling program for a period of time. And then let's move down to that classroom management area. Obviously, your no effort to improve school culture and climate. This is really about not just your classroom and your skills in the classroom, but also broadening that to school culture and climate. Are you involved, and are you pushing some initiatives to improve that school climate and culture? Are you using data to form that decision? Are you helping with behavior plans? And then finally, in that highly effective area, are you looking at the entire picture of classroom, school, and possibly even district climate and culture? And are you using that engages students and facilitates student success?
And so now looking at Standard 7, professional growth. This is one of the standards that's most closely aligned with our Iowa teaching standards, looking at what the professional knowledge and skills are needed for a counselor to administer a comprehensive program and promote student success. And again, recognizing that counselors have a unique set of skills and abilities that they bring to the table for this work. As we look at that, this is about professional development and the need to have content-specific professional development and participating in professional organizations that can help align the work that you're doing on a daily basis with the profession of school counseling. So some suggestions there listed are ASCA or ISCA within your AEAs, and even building district or PLC involvement that can all be counseling specific. Also looking at the creation of your yearly professional development plan and how we look at the goals and benchmarks being used in accordance with the annual agreement that can be done with an administrator and counselor on an annual basis. And then looking at our personal reflection and consultation is when we talk about the evaluation process and using it for reflection and using it as an opportunity for professional growth always. And then engaging in that professional development and using your resources, what you've learned, to actually apply to your work. So as we dig into this standard a little bit deeper here, looking at the professional organizations, being effective, having a membership in some professional organizations, taking advantage of the opportunities that are relevant to the school counseling profession. We know that we all have requirements as far as our licensure or employment in terms of professional development. So that is a basic level, still developing or needing improvement, but moving on from there to finding the content specific. And then highly effective is being able to show how we've taken the learnings from those professional memberships or professional development opportunities and applying it in our daily practice. And then also actively participating and taking leadership roles in professional organizations. That could also be professional development opportunities within your own district and helping to further the work of other counselors yourself. Planning for professional growth. Looking at the individual professional development plans, sometimes called different titles in different districts. Looking at this, by not having a yearly plan for professional growth would be ineffective. And developing a professional growth plan, but being inconsistent in completing the plan would still be in this developing. But I think it's important to note here that this tool can be used to help educate your administrator about some of the needs and roles you have in order to grow professionally, especially when we talked about earlier in Standard 5, the use of data. If access to that data is a challenge, this tool can be used. If that is your growth area, is to more consistently use data, you can share this tool with your administrator to show them the importance of you accessing that data. And so looking at that, then being able to develop and implement your plan and demonstrate that you have grown in that way. And then highly effective, having that be aligned with the ASCA model, state requirements, and all of your school district goals along the way. And then finally, with the school counselor appraisal process, By not really paying attention to what we're doing or not participating in that at all and not having goals to improve our skills and performance, that would be ineffective. But then moving forward with that, I think we'll just focus on the effective by completing reflective and self-appraisal related to our skills and performance, and then developing goals and benchmarks to improve school counseling skills and performance. Again, I think the use of this supplement is a natural way to tie those in, to be reflective, monitor our growth, and that is, again, why one of the primary purposes of this document being created.
And finally, for the last standard, which is professional responsibilities, again, this is very similar to that of a teacher in terms of following some ethical standards and principles, but it's also ratcheted up several notches because as a school counselor, you have much higher levels of ethics and confidentiality, much more descriptive areas, and all of those need to be taken into consideration as you do this. A great resource is, of course, the ASCA standards for ethical responsibility for school counselors. So as we look at the rubric, you'll notice that this rubric looks a little bit different in terms of the ethical standards and confidentiality. We don't really have degrees of ethics or confidentiality. You either do it or you don't. And so you'll see there for ethical standards that you've got, you practice those ethical principles, you share information about ethical guidelines as needed, you use an ethical decision-making model appropriate for work in schools and your work with your different age groups, and you're always looking for consultation and supervision to guide that legal and ethical decision-making process. You understand that the work that you do is different from that of a teacher and even an administrator in terms of ethics and, again, moving down into confidentiality. You have informed consent. You have that confidentiality is appropriate to students, parents, administration, and staff. You consistently protect the confidentiality of minor students. And those are huge issues for the school counselor. And it's easy to start to drift over in one area and not, in the majority of ethical violations that we hear are those big ones that make the news. But unfortunately, the ones that we don't hear about, and I guess fortunately too, are the ones where you just start to drift over and just have those areas of gray in terms of ethics and confidentiality. And we really need to focus on what meets the standard and doesn't meet the standard in terms of the ethical standards for school counselors. Finally, of course, much like that of a teacher, we have district, local, state, and federal policies that guide our work. And so all of those are listed here. And we need to be aware of all of those, and we need to follow those in our work as employees of the district and as leaders of education for our students. So that completes the last section of this webinar. Again, if you have any questions, any feedback, or any suggestions, please contact Sue Shermer at Heartland Area Education Agency or Meredith Doman at Des Moines Schools.